The phone shattered the calm of a February night at 12:17 a.m., yanking me from a rare moment of decent sleep. My fingers fumbled blindly across the bedside table, knocking over an empty mug before finally finding the phone. It was Sergeant Collins from the Devonshire County Police. They'd found my nephew, Jamie, alive, but he wouldn't speak to anyone but me. I threw off the covers, heart hammering, and slipped into my boots and coat. Outside, the cold February air bit through my thin sweater as I hurried to the car. My breath billowed in front of me like ghostly smoke, and the engine groaned before catching, reluctant in the chill. The drive up to the moorland was tense, with frost glazing the winding country roads, and every minute stretched longer than the last. Jamie had been missing for 3 days, while his mother, my sister-in-law Claire, had told everyone he was staying with friends. The police only started searching seriously after Mrs. Ellis, the local postmistress, spotted a small figure wandering near the edge of the woods. Sergeant Collins met me at the police station door, his face grim but relieved. Jamie was inside, wrapped in a thick blanket, hypothermia setting in but stable. I pushed open the door and saw him sitting on a bench, his small frame hunched, his dirty face smeared with grime. His eyes, once bright and full of mischief, stared blankly ahead. He looked smaller than ever, a shivering shadow of the boy I remembered. I crouched beside him, keeping my voice steady. Slowly, his head turned toward me. "Uncle Tom," he whispered. I swallowed the lump in my throat and told him I'd come for him, that he was safe now, and he wouldn't be alone ever again. His cold fingers closed around mine, fragile but trusting. The drive home was quiet except for the hum of the heater struggling against the frost. Jamie leaned against the door, the blanket still wrapped tight around him, sleeping at last. When we reached the cottage, I carried him inside, his body light as a feather. I tucked him into the spare room, the one with the faded wallpaper and the stack of old books that had waited for visitors who rarely came anymore. He whispered, barely audible, asking if his mother would be back. I didn't lie. I told him I didn't know, but that here he was safe. That was enough. Later, I sat by the kitchen window, nursing a cup of black tea, staring out at the leafless oak silhouetted against the moonlit sky. My phone buzzed, Claire's name flashing on the screen. A message. "Hope you found him. I need some time to sort things out." I deleted it without a word. 2 weeks later, I sat opposite my solicitor, Mr. Fletcher, in his cluttered office smelling of leather and ink. Outside, the drizzle blurred the view of the sleepy Devonshire village square. "The trust is ironclad," he said, adjusting his spectacles. "Jamie won't have access to the funds until he's 21, unless a change of guardianship is granted. The new guardian would have discretionary access for his education and welfare." I blinked. "How much are we talking about?" "Around £700,000, plus life insurance. It could be over $1 million by the time he's an adult." I whistled softly. My brother had been careful with money, even if he never talked about it much. "Claire knows. She was present at the will reading 3 years ago, but at that time she was still functioning." Fletcher chose his words carefully. "She held it together for about 6 months after your brother's accident at the mill. Then she started drinking. First a glass of wine at dinner, then a bottle alone. Men came and went, drifters, bar regulars. Nothing steady." I clenched my jaw. "What's the process for changing guardianship?" "She'd have to petition the court and prove she's fit to parent. Given recent events, I doubt she'll succeed. And if you want to make it permanent, you'll need to file for legal guardianship, supported by reports documenting neglect. It should be straightforward." I signed the papers that afternoon. By the time spring arrived, I was Jamie's legal guardian. Claire had disappeared with a trucker named Mick, heading toward Cornwall, according to Mrs. Ellis, who seemed to know everyone's business. Jamie stopped asking about his mother. He helped me string fairy lights in the garden, and learned to make pancakes on Saturday mornings. When he found the restored mountain bike waiting for him under the willow tree, his face lit up for the first time since that nightmare night. "Is it really mine?" he asked, eyes wide. "Every bolt and spoke. But no racing until you're older," I warned. He nodded solemnly. "I understand." That evening, as we sat by the crackling wood stove, Jamie looked up from the model plane he was assembling. "Uncle Tom?" "Yeah. I'm glad I live here now." I ruffled his dark hair, smelling the faint scent of pine and damp earth clinging to him. Me too, mate. The next morning the social worker called to arrange a home visit. I hung up and glanced around the cottage, warm, tidy, safe. Jamie had his own room, regular meals, and a steady routine. Most importantly, he had someone who wanted him. That was far more than his mother had ever given. The years passed with the steady rhythm of the tides. I woke early, brewed strong tea, and checked the weather. Jamie dressed himself for school by 7, ate breakfast at the kitchen table where the morning light streamed in, and then headed out to the workshop. The welding shop became our shared sanctuary. At first, Jamie watched from a safe distance, wearing oversized safety glasses that made him look like a pint-sized astronaut. By 8, he was sorting tools and learning the names of metals. By 10, he was making his first joints on scrap steel, his small hands surprisingly steady. Keep the arc length consistent, I instructed, watching him concentrate. Too close and the rod sticks. Too far and you get porosity. He adjusted his stance, his welding hood hiding his face, but his focus shining through. Better. Now watch your travel speed. He was a natural patient beyond his years. He'd spend an hour perfecting a single joint, unwilling to settle for less. Evenings belonged to the bike. The mountain bike was soon joined by a bigger one, then another as he grew and learned engine maintenance. We rode the trails behind the cottage, weaving through oaks and across meadows. Stay loose on the bars, I'd call over my shoulder. Let the bike do the work. Jamie relaxed his grip, and his ride smoothed instantly. By 12, he could strip down a carburetor and rebuild it without help. By 13, he was outpacing me on the technical trails, but the quiet mornings fishing by the stream remained our best times. We'd sit side by side in companionable silence, watching the water ripple. Think there's any big ones left? He asked one dawn, reeling in a small trout. Your dad caught a 14-inch right over there when he was your age, I said, pointing to a deep pool beneath the alder trees. We'd fought over that fish for nearly half an hour. Jamie loved those stories about his father, stubborn and tough despite his size. He never backed down, I told him. Just like you. Yeah, he said softly. Like me. Jamie grew into a quiet, serious lad. He made good grades without pressure, helped around the workshop without being asked, and never gave me a moment's real trouble. Other parents complained about their teens. Mine was easier to live with than most adults I knew. He had friends at school but preferred the workshop and the moors to town's distractions. Some would have called him a loner, but I understood. After what Claire had done, trust didn't come easily. Better to be cautious about who you let close. One evening as we tinkered with a worn-out engine, I asked, got a girlfriend? He looked up, brushing grease from his hands. There's a girl in my science class. Sophie. She's clever. You asked her out? Not yet. Maybe. When you do, bring her around. I'll try not to embarrass you too much. He grinned. You'll probably scare her off with all your welding talk. Hey, welding's fascinating, part science, part art. Sure it is. We worked in comfortable silence, the radio playing soft folk tunes. These moments were precious. Just him and me, hands busy, no need for heavy conversation. Jamie had turned out well despite everything. Better than well. Responsible, hard-working, decent. Nothing like his mother. But sometimes late at night I wondered if Claire would ever come back. Not if, but when and what she'd want then. I pushed the thought away. Crossed that bridge when we came to it. For now things were good. Better than good. Jamie was home. And that was all that mattered. Years slipped by like pages in a well-worn novel, each one folding seamlessly into the next. The cottage and workshop settled into a comforting rhythm that suited us both. I rose at dawn, brewed strong tea, and reviewed the day's tasks while Jamie dressed himself for school without fuss. Breakfasts were simple but hearty, scrambled eggs, thick slices of toast, sometimes his favorite blueberry pancakes on lazy Saturday mornings. The workshop was our domain, a place where silence spoke louder than words. Jamie's progress with welding was nothing short of remarkable. At first he hovered at the edges, wearing safety goggles that made him look like a pint-sized astronaut, lost in a galaxy of steel and sparks. By the time he was 9, he was organizing tools, learning the difference between mild steel and stainless, and carefully following my instructions like a young apprentice. At 11, he was making joints on scrap pieces, his hands steady and sure beyond his years. Keep your arc length steady, I'd remind him, watching his brow furrow in concentration. Too close and you'll stick the rod. Too far and the weld gets porous. Like this. I demonstrated, the blue-white light illuminating my face beneath the welding helmet. A ghostly mask of concentration. Jamie adjusted his stance, his little welding hood making him look like a tiny astronaut on a mission. Better. Now watch your travel speed. He was a natural with patience most kids lacked. He'd labor over a single joint for an hour, unwilling to settle for anything less than perfect. Evenings were spent on the trails, our bikes kicking up dust and leaves as we navigated winding paths through the moors and woodlands. The first mountain bike had been a birthday gift. A battered old thing I'd restored from parts scavenged at the local scrapyard. It was soon joined by a sturdier model as Jamie grew. And then another, each one a little faster, a little more powerful. Stay loose on the bars, I called over my shoulder one evening, let the bike do the work. Jamie relaxed his grip, and his ride smoothed instantly. By 13 he was outpacing me on the tricky sections, his confidence growing with every mile. But the quiet mornings fishing by the stream, sitting side by side in companionable silence, remained our favorite moments. Think there's any big ones left in there? He asked one dawn, reeling in a small trout. Your dad caught a 14-inch right over there when he was your age, I said, pointing to a deep pool beneath the alder trees. We fought over that fish for nearly half an hour. Jamie loved those stories about his father, stubborn and tough despite his size. He never backed down, I told him. Just like you. Yeah, he whispered. Like me. Jamie grew into a quiet, serious young man. He made good grades without pressure, helped in the workshop without being asked, and rarely gave me any real trouble. Other parents complained about their teenagers. Mine was easier to live with than most adults I knew. He had friends at school but preferred the workshop and the moors to the distractions of town. Some might have called him a loner, but I understood. After what Claire had done, trust didn't come easily. Better to be cautious about who you let close. Point one evening, as we stripped down an old engine in the workshop, I asked, got a girlfriend? He looked up, grease smudging his cheek. There's a girl in my science class. Sophie. She's clever. You asked her out? Not yet. Maybe. When you do, bring her around. I'll try not to embarrass you too much. He grinned, a flash of youthful mischief. You'll probably scare her off with all your welding talk. Hey, welding's fascinating, part science, part art. Sure it is. We worked in companionable silence, the radio playing soft folk tunes in the background. These moments were precious, just him and me, hands busy, no need for heavy conversation. Jamie had turned out well despite everything. Better than well. Responsible, hard-working, decent. Nothing like his mother. But sometimes late at night I wondered if Claire would ever come back. Not if, but when, and what she'd want then. I pushed the thought away. Crossed that bridge when we came to it. For now things were good. Better than good. Jamie was home. And that was all that mattered. It was nearly 10 years since that freezing night on the moor when Claire's pristine white Range Rover rolled up the gravel drive like a scene from a glossy magazine. I watched from the workshop window as she stepped out, smoothing her elegant cream coat and checking her reflection in the tinted glass. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, makeup flawless, the kind of woman who looked like she'd just stepped out of a fashion editorial. She looked like money. Jamie was at the workbench, grinding down a rough weld on a gate we were building for the local farm. The harsh buzz of the grinder masked the soft click of her heels on gravel, but my hand on Jamie's shoulder made him glance up. What? He mouthed. I nodded toward the window. They both watched as Claire advanced toward the cottage, her heels clicking sharply, the cream coat swishing with every step. She wore a delicate silk dress underneath, probably more expensive than most people earned in a month, and jewelry that caught the fading afternoon light like tiny stars. Should I? Jamie started. Stay here, I said firmly. I'll handle this. I stepped outside just as Claire reached the porch. She turned at the sound of my boots crunching gravel, and for a moment, I saw a flicker cross her face. Surprise, calculation, or maybe both. Hello, Tom, she said, her voice smooth as silk. She'd aged well, I had to admit. Money and good doctors did wonders. But those icy blue eyes, cold as a winter sea, were the same. Hard to read, like a cat sizing up its prey. You look well, she said, a hint of false sweetness. Devonshire agrees with you. Why are you here? I asked, keeping my voice level. She laughed, but it sounded brittle. Can I visit my son? He stopped being your son the day you left him on the moor, I said quietly. That was no mistake that I was going through a difficult time. A breakdown, she said, stepping closer, putting on that old persuasive smile. People make poor decisions when they're hurting. Some people do, I replied, voice sharp as a blade. You drove a 5-year-old 8 miles into the wilderness and left him there. I was lucky someone found him, her smile tightened. I was young. I was grieving. I've gotten help since. I'm in a good place now, financially, emotionally. I can provide for him properly. He's provided for by a welder who works with his hands, I said, gesturing toward the workshop. He has opportunities here too. Education, steadiness, love. Things you never gave him. Don't pretend you know what my husband wanted, she said, eyes narrowing. If he were here, he'd want me to have custody. You don't get to speak for him, I said. And if he were here, he'd tell you to get back in that fancy car and disappear again. Her mask slipped, revealing something darker beneath. Then she smoothed it back into place. Jamie's 15 now. Old enough to have a say in his future. No, I said firmly. He's not a prize to be fought over. He's a boy who's been through enough. He deserves stability. You haven't been his mother for 10 years. Claire's smile turned brittle. I think we should let him decide. Before I could answer, the workshop door opened. Jamie stepped out, sleeves rolled up, safety glasses perched on his head. He'd grown tall in the last year, nearly matching my height, broad-shouldered and steady-eyed. The spitting image of his father, but steadier, stronger. Claire's eyes flickered as she looked at him. Less like a mother, more like a woman eyeing a possession. Look at you, she said softly. So grown up. Jamie stopped beside me and studied her with the same careful attention he gave to his welds. Why now? Why after all this time? Claire glanced between us. I needed time to get my life together. Now I'm ready to be the mother he deserves. I have school tomorrow and work after, Jamie said carefully. Maybe you should come back another time. He turned and walked back to the workshop, the door closing softly behind him. Claire stared after him, mouth slightly open, the mask cracking. He's changed, she whispered. He's grown up. She turned back to me, eyes hard as flint. We need to talk about the trust. Jamie should be living with his mother. You haven't been his mother for a decade, I said. The courts don't care about grudges, just biology and best interests. I can provide things you can't, she said. Education, travel, culture, things Jamie deserves, like abandonment, neglect and instability. I said bitterly. Like the time you left him alone in the moor? Claire smoothed her coat again, a gesture that looked automatic. You'll be hearing from my solicitor. I nodded. I'm looking forward to it. She walked back to the Range Rover without another word. The engine purred softly, and she drove away without looking back. I watched until the tail lights vanished around the bend, then turned back to the workshop. Jamie was at the bench, hands busy with the gate project, but his movements were tighter, more guarded than usual. You okay? I asked. She looks different, Jamie said. Money can do that. She doesn't look like she's been suffering. I picked up a wrench. What do you remember about before? Bits and pieces, he said quietly. Her crying a lot. Strange men coming around smelling of wine. Being hungry sometimes. You showing up with groceries, taking me fishing on weekends. We worked in silence for a while. She wants to trust money, I said finally. Not people. Jamie nodded slowly. How much is there? Enough to make people do stupid things. What happens now? Now we wait and see what she does next. And if she tries to take you away. I met his steady gaze. That's not going to happen. You sure? I've never. The first whispers reached me at the village cafe one drizzly morning. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business before their first cup of tea. I was sitting at the counter, waiting for my usual black coffee, no sugar, when I overheard Mrs. Pritchard, the local librarian, murmuring to the barista about Jamie. That poor lad, working with all that dangerous machinery. No one watching him properly, they say. It's not right for a boy his age, she said, voice low but urgent. I stiffened, my jaw tightening. Jamie worked in the workshop under my supervision, with every safety precaution in place. Still, the rumors had begun to spread like wildfire, each one more poisonous than the last. The idea that I was neglecting him, letting him near dangerous equipment unsupervised, or that I was drinking too much, these lies stung, but they were only the beginning. A few days later, Jamie came home from school looking puzzled. Mr. Collins wants to see you tomorrow, he said. He asked if I felt safe at home, if I was getting enough to eat. Did you tell him the truth? I asked, heart-sinking. Of course. I told him everything's fine. But he didn't seem convinced that I promised to talk to the school counselor. When I met Mr. Collins, he was polite but probing, clearly fishing for signs of trouble. We've received concerns about Jamie's welfare, he said carefully. Nothing specific, but enough to warrant a check-in. Concerns? I echoed. About what? About supervision, working conditions, possible substance abuse, he said, choosing his words with care. Who's making these reports? I'm afraid I can't disclose that, he replied. That I left the meeting frustrated. Someone was deliberately trying to undermine me, spreading poison drop by drop, hoping some of it would stick. That evening my phone rang. It was Mr. Fletcher, my solicitor. Claire's solicitor has filed for custody, he said gravely. The hearing's set for next month. I pulled over on the side of the road, the weight of it pressing down. On what grounds? Unsafe environment, lack of supervision, substance abuse, he recited. All lies, but she's building a case. Then what do? We document everything. School records, medical reports, evidence of Jamie's well-being. And no drinking, not even socially. Be impeccable. The next weeks were a blur of meticulous record-keeping, careful behavior, and mounting tension. Rumors kept swirling. Jamie skipping school, riding his bike without a helmet on the highway. None of it true, but believable enough to sow doubt. Claire was playing a dangerous game, turning neighbors into weapons, and people I'd known for years began to look at me sideways. Even my closest friends whispered questions behind my back. Then one Tuesday afternoon, a black government car pulled into the driveway. 2 women in official suits stepped out, Child Protective Services. I told Jamie to wash up, knowing this was going to be difficult. The social workers introduced themselves, professional but kind. Their questions were routine but probing, about Jamie's safety, his supervision, my habits. Jamie answered with calm honesty, describing his work in the workshop, the safety measures, his sense of security. I showed them the house, spotless and orderly. Jamie's room was neat, filled with model planes, books, and posters of engines. The kitchen was stocked with fresh food. The workshop was equipped with proper ventilation and safety gear. After hours of inspection, the lead social worker sighed. We've found no evidence of neglect or abuse. Jamie appears healthy and well cared for. But the case will remain open for 60 days as a precaution. When they left, Jamie and I sat at the kitchen table, sharing a pot of tea and the quiet relief of survival. They seemed okay, he said. But this won't be the end. I think you're right, I admitted. Claire's just getting started. The day of the hearing dawned cold and sharp. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and nervous anticipation. Jamie and I sat with Mr. Fletcher, reviewing our notes one last time. Across the room, Claire appeared poised and polished, her solicitor impeccably dressed and confident. The judge entered. A stern woman with a reputation for fairness and no nonsense. The courtroom settled into silence as proceedings began. Claire's solicitor painted a picture of redemption and opportunity, emphasizing her financial stability and eagerness to provide Jamie with a life of education and culture beyond our small village. When it was my turn, I spoke simply, from the heart. I told them about the decade I'd spent raising Jamie, about the evenings in the workshop, the fishing trips, the lessons in responsibility and love. I spoke of the abandonment, the years of silence, and the trust broken. Jamie's testimony was steady and clear. He spoke of his life here, the stability, the love, and his wish to remain. Then Mr. Fletcher played the recording, a candid capture of Claire's drunken ramblings at the village pub, revealing her true intentions, sending Jamie away to boarding school, cutting ties, and taking control of the trust money. The courtroom was silent as the judge listened. Claire's composure crumbled. When the ruling came, it was decisive. Custody remained with me. Claire was ordered to keep her distance, and the matter was referred to the authorities for investigation into child abandonment. Outside the courthouse, Claire stormed past without a word, her heels clicking angrily on the stone steps. Jamie watched her leave with a mix of pity and resolve. As we drove home, the mountains rising like ancient guardians around us, I felt the weight lift slightly. The battle was over, but the war for Jamie's future was just beginning. That evening, sitting on the tailgate of my old truck, watching the sun dip behind the hills, Jamie picked up a smooth stone and tossed it toward the stream. You okay? I asked. Better than okay, he said. a small smile tugging at his lips. You know what the strangest thing was? What? When she talked about all those opportunities she could give me, all I could think was, I already have everything I want. This place, the workshop, the hills, even without boarding school and fancy friends. Jamie grinned. Especially without those things. We sat in the fading light, the world quiet around us, knowing that some things were worth fighting for because they were home. Weeks passed, the kind where the early morning mist clings stubbornly to the fields and the faint scent of earth and rain settles into your clothes. Life began to reclaim its steady rhythm, but the echoes of the court battle lingered like shadows at the edges of every day. Jamie and I fell back into our familiar patterns, workshop mornings filled with the clang of metal and the hiss of the welder, afternoons spent riding the trails that ribbon through the countryside, evenings huddled by the fire with cups of stew and quiet conversation. Mrs. Ellis, ever the village's unofficial news source, called one afternoon with a piece of information that made my stomach twist. Claire had left the county again, this time bound for Cornwall with a man who sold questionable antiques out of the back of his van. Good riddance, she said, voice sharp. That boy's better off without her stirring up trouble. The rumors that had once threatened to unravel us dissolved as quickly as they'd appeared. Jamie's teachers returned to praising his work, and the village seemed to settle back into its old, comfortable acceptance of us. At Murphy's Cafe, I was once again greeted as local hero, a title I bore with modesty and a fair bit of disbelief. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. The uncertainty had been replaced by something more solid, more permanent. We weren't just making it up as we went along anymore. We were family, legally, officially, permanently. One rainy afternoon, as the sky darkened and the wind rattled the windows, Jamie looked up from the carburetor he was meticulously cleaning. I've been thinking about the trust fund, he said, voice quiet but resolute. I wiped my hands on a rag and looked at him. What about it? When I turn 21, I want to use some of it to expand the workshop. Maybe get some new equipment, take on bigger projects. Build something lasting. A warmth spread through my chest, a mixture of pride and hope. That what your dad would have wanted? Yeah, Jamie said, eyes steady. Something useful. Something that helps people. And the rest, maybe a college fund for my kids someday. I chuckled, the sound rough but genuine. College fund, huh? Fancy that. Jamie grinned. Maybe a new truck too. Yours is ancient. I shook my head, smiling. You're stuck with me, you know? Even when you're 21 and don't need a guardian anymore. Good, he said. I wasn't planning on going anywhere either. That evening, as the rain softened to a drizzle, we drove up to the moorlands, those same hills where Jamie's story had begun, where the cold night had almost swallowed him whole. But we weren't running from anything now. We were claiming our ground, standing firm where our story had started, ready for whatever came next. The pines whispered in the wind, keeping their secrets, marking the passage of time as they always had. Some things endure. Some things are worth fighting for. The years that followed folded into a quiet kind of contentment, the kind that settles deep into your bones like the steady pulse of the earth beneath the moor. Jamie and I carved out a life that felt both ordinary and extraordinary, a patchwork of shared routines, small victories, and the unspoken bond formed between two souls who had weathered storms together. The workshop grew just as Jamie had dreamed. We added a new welding station, brighter lights, and a proper ventilation system that hummed softly in the background as we worked. The smell of hot metal and oil became the scent of home. Jamie's hands, once small and tentative, moved with the confidence and precision of someone who had found his calling. His welds gleamed smooth and strong, the kind of work that spoke of patience and pride. On weekends, we'd ride the winding trails that cut through the ancient oaks and heather, the wind whipping past us, the world opening wide and wild around us. Jamie's laughter, once rare and cautious, now rang clear and free, a melody I treasured more than I could say. One crisp autumn evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in hues of amber and rose, Jamie stood at the edge of the moor, the wind tugging at his jacket. He looked out over the rolling hills, his face thoughtful. I've been thinking, he said, voice soft, about the future. Not just the shop or the money. About everything. I nodded, waiting. I want to build something that lasts, he continued. Not just things, but a life, a family, maybe even kids someday. The words settled over me like a warm blanket. I reached out, ruffling his hair with a smile. Sounds like a plan, but beneath the warmth, a quiet unease lingered. The past, with its shadows and scars, had a way of creeping back uninvited. One evening as we closed up the workshop, I noticed a car parked half a mile down the lane. A sleek black vehicle unfamiliar in these parts. Its windows were tinted, the engine silent but ominous. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. Jamie caught my glance and frowned. You think someone's watching us? Maybe, I said, voice low. Could be nothing. But it feels like the calm before a storm. That night sleep was elusive. The wind whispered secrets through the cracks in the windows, and the shadows in the corners seemed to shift and breathe. I lay awake, heart pounding, thinking of everything we'd fought for, everything we'd lost, and everything still to come. Because some stories don't end with victory or peace. They end with questions, and the next chapter waiting just beyond the horizon.